And tonight we have a special guest, an extra special guest. You know her name for all the things she's been through, all the things she does. Tonight we have the one and only Jemele Hill, and she joins us to talk about her new memoir. It's called Uphill, and there is a lot to get into. The memoir is a raw and candid account of Hill's life, from her early childhood in Detroit to her 12 years as a sports journalist for ESPN to all the amazing things she's done in her life. And in this book, she tackles taboo issues like addiction, sexual violence, race and gender disparities in the workplace, and so much more. And the legend herself, Jemele Hill, award-winning sports journalist, author of Uphill, a memoir, and of course, the host of Jemele Hill Unbothered. She joins me now. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Mark. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this.
So you are a very interesting figure. You're in the public eye. You put certain parts of your life out there. But a lot of what you do in the public sphere is the work, the analysis, the storytelling, the journalism. And then you come out with a memoir where you actually putting stuff out there. What made you want to do that now?
Well, I think it all ties back to the way I was raised and groomed in this business of journalism. Certainly when I sit down with an interview subject, and I know you probably feel the same way, is you want the person you're sitting down with to be transparent with you, to be vulnerable with you, to be raw with you, depending on, obviously, on the nature of the interview. And I always feel like something as personal as a memoir, that's what not only you deserve, but that's who the people who read it deserve. Because I did not want to be in one of those situations where people would read my memoir and feel like I was holding back, or they didn't know the full story, or there was something being left out. I wanted you to read this and be like, she clearly left all the plays on the field. Like, that's how I feel. And that's what I did. And beyond all that, I wasn't in any way trying, to be inflammatory or any of those things. But I know that around some of the difficult topics that I talk about, which you already mentioned, there's a layer of shame that goes around those topics. Sometimes we struggle within our own families how to deal with these complicated issues of addiction, abuse, be it, physical, mental, or sexual. We struggle with those in our own family. So I was hoping that by talking about them, that it would give people or make them feel more empowered to have these discussions within their family, with their friends, so that there could be a true sense of healing. So all of that kind of went into it. And it's just kind of the way I'm built is like, oh no, if I'm gonna tell a story, my story in particular, look, nobody else gonna get to drop on me and find something out. I'm gonna tell you myself.
Right.
Exactly the context, everything around it. So I thought it was just important to be really open with people.
Yeah, I mean, it's powerful. I mean, one of the things about memoir is that you're not just telling your business, you're also, by virtue of telling your life story, or telling other people's business. What were there any challenges in terms of, or fears around saying, look, I'm going to talk about my parents. I'm going to talk about drug addiction. I'm going to talk about my mom experiencing sexual violence at a young age by a relative. It's one thing to talk about your stories, but you also talk about the family stories. Is that hard to do?
It is very difficult to do because you're writing about real people. So you have to, especially if they're still in your life and you guys still have a relationship, you have to be cognizant and really give some intention into thinking about, how do I want these relationships to be after this book is going to come out? Now, that doesn't mean that that's going to make me pull any punches, but it does mean that I'm going to put the care and attention into what I want those relationships to look like going forward, and maybe some of the additional conversations that can be sprung up out of them. I wasn't really worried about my mother, because her and I have had those discussions over the years. So I thought she was pretty prepared for it. She knew what I was putting in here. And I think she had definitely reached a place of comfort where she was fine with it. I certainly asked my dad a lot of questions, but it was a little different because my mother read the book, when changes could still be made. I didn't ship my father the book until like a week ago. So he saw the finished product, but and this is obviously no disrespect to my father at all, but he and I have a different relationship than he and my mother. And of course I care about maintaining that relationship, but I just felt like there were certain things that, I knew that he would read, and knowing how I felt about it, that none of it was necessarily a surprise, but I didn't think there was anything I disclosed about him that he needed to get the heads up on, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Right.
He was with my mother. because of the depth. And she was the one who raised me. So the responsibility to her felt a little different. The only people who read it beforehand, or I should say, as it was still being edited, would be my mother, my husband, of course, because I didn't want him to be surprised by anything. And even though he knew the headlines of a lot of the things that I talked about, there were specific incidents that I talked about beneath those headlines that he may not have actually known about. So he was somebody. And then, of course, a couple of my friends and that kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, who were there, who were definitely an audience member as some of these things, were happening. But no, everybody didn't get that privilege. I mean, none of my exes got sent a book.
Exes don't deserve it. Exes don't. They need to find out when you like on the morning talk show circuit when you know what I mean, or it comes up. I appreciate that.
Yeah, but you break up a great point, because obviously one of the bigger things I disclose in the book is my abortion. Now, the person who impregnated me, I did not say who that was in the book. That was a fake name. That's not his real name, because even though he and I have not talked in years, he still has a right to tell that story. I don't know who he's told it to. And I feel like he still deserves that. Like, you were a partner in me with this, but if you don't ever want anybody to know, you still need to have that decision. Or if you do want people to know, I'm going to let you be the one to tell it. So I was definitely very cognizant of people being allowed to tell their own stories outside of me. So that, you have to be very conscious of that as well.
One of the things I noticed in the rollout of the book was an interview and I think an excerpt about you and your mom and that specific relationship. And you just said that you were really committed to nurturing and protecting that relationship in a very particular way. She's the one who raised you. Despite everything, there's a commitment to that. What's it been like, the healing process for you two? Not just in light of the book, but just in general. What's that journey been like?
Ongoing is probably the best description for it, because I don't think, when you're talking about the pervasiveness of the trauma my mother experienced, to being, somebody who is molested from ages 4 to 11 to suffering of a very violent rape later on as an adult, the drug addiction and usage in between, like, that's not something that you can heal from in a couple of conversations. It's been an ongoing process that has gone through many stages. It's gone through the stage of anger, the stage of resentment. I mean, mostly I'm talking about how I feel, not really how my mother feels. It's gone through, I think the phase of misunderstanding. It's gone through so many different phases. And through each phase, even if it was rocky, at the end of that particular phase, I felt like we were in a better place. I know you're an Eagles guy and a football fan. And so what I would say is that this is like, we're advancing the ball down the field, right? We get first downs. Sometimes we have tackles for losses. Okay. Sometimes that happens. Might be a pick in there now and again.
Right.
But generally, we're advancing in the right direction. And I think this chapter, with all of this stuff coming out and my mother being able to really tell her story in full for the first time, I think it's been very healing. I mean, we went on Red Table Talk, and I thought that was a very encouraging and positive experience. And my mother, I think, felt a different sense of healing because she was in the company of other people who had gone through the same thing. And it was the first time her and I were ever interviewed together. And then we were in the presence of a therapist, which we've never done. And so I thought that was all that moved. I mean, that was like a 20-yard pass play down the field, I think, for our relationship.
One of the things that might cause turnovers, to extend the metaphor, I would imagine would be politics. I mean, your mom is a Black conservative, and you are very decidedly not that. How did that shape growing up? But more importantly, like now, are there moments where you're like, how? Or she's looking at you like, how? Why?
Well, and I don't know how this works out with everybody else's family. Well, first of all, we could just say this, Mark, and I think you would agree with me, but if I'm wrong, I'm sure you'll tell me. Black people are more conservative than people think, right?
Yes.
But we get
Yes, Lord.
Yes, we are. Like, especially if you have had any part of your life where you've grown up under a church influence. Like, I started going to Baptist church when I was young. My grandmother, heavily Baptist. My whole family, heavily Baptist. My grandfather, deacon, like Baptist. Like they up in some church. And anytime, as most of us have been, you're up under that umbrella, there are conservative principles that a lot of us have. The difference,
including you?
I don't know about that now. I mean, like I think at one point, I mean, I've been a little bit more conservative, but I do think that it's there. And the part that particularly the Republican Party doesn't understand is that whole pull yourself up out of bootstrap, that ain't nothing new. We've been hearing that our whole lives. From people
every time a cousin of mine or a family member of mine borrows money, I become real. I'll be like, yo, why can't he get a job? Yo, why he keep going to jail? Like, I get all the structural stuff, but when it comes to your own people, sometimes I swear I sound like a right winger. Yo, I want you to hold on. I want to take a quick break and come back, and we're on the other side of this. Welcome back to The Griot with Marc Lamont Hill. We have been talking to sports journalist and author Jemele Hill. Her new memoir is called Uphill. It is available in stores everywhere that they sell books. You can get it right now. You were talking, one of the things about the Republican Party is that they don't get that black folk have a conservative streak. You were saying, how does that play out for you in terms of everyday life? Again, your mom's a black conservative. You are on the left side of the aisle. But there are tensions, not just in your relationship, but probably in the black community. Every black church on Sunday has some beliefs that might resonate more with Republicans than with Democrats, and yet we still vote the other way.
Yeah, I mean, because it's the racism we don't like. I mean, it's like, it's the racism. We'll be like, okay, you had me up until, right? Let's think that way. But, and then because we have been under the boot of some of these structural issues for so long, we understand that there's more to the story, that there's broader context, that there are variables you have to account for. And Republicans don't really get that. So it's not that we're all left and liberal leaning. It's that we just, no, we don't think you should be waving a Confederate flag. No, we don't believe in all these very extreme principles that you seem to want to convey. So how it plays out in my own family is interesting, because it is, with my mother in particular, because it's very much tied to religion. And, we see what the evangelical influence is on the Republican Party. Like, it's pretty strong. And I think, like my mother, for example, I've had an abortion. My mother is a pro-life person, and she will vote based off that. Like, that's what she will vote off of. And I'm like, it's a lot more else that we need to be concerned about. And in her mind, she feels like she's doing the biblical thing. And that her, as she puts it, a biblical worldview is being, anti-abortion, anti some other things. And even though there's sort of a lot of layers of hypocrisy within that, I'm just like, do what you gonna do. I couldn't do it. That couldn't be me, but do what you do, right? And it is, I think, one of the tension points that has been in our relationship. And I'm not saying just because you were that person that you have to stay that person, but I do think who you were before, maybe you've done some healing and some work, is somebody you shouldn't forget, because it gives you perspective. And so sometimes when we do have these political discussions, which I have to be honest, is not very often, because I think it's better for our relationship. So pretty much after 2016, 2017, I just left the political discussions for me off the table. Now, occasionally they do pop up, and you already know how it is. You're talking about a Black woman that's in her 60s that has lived a couple of lives. You're not going to be able to tell them nothing. Once I just personally made the decision that, because I didn't want it to contaminate our relationship, I didn't want it to be, I didn't want our conversations to always revolve around politics or different things. I'm okay to tap out.
And that takes maturity and a certain level of removing the ego from the conversation. Because I still want to win, right? I still want to prove to them this don't make no sense. But at some point, you got to let that go if you want to preserve relationships. Speaking of preserving relationships, you talk about ESPN in the book, of course, and you talk about ESPN not supporting you at a time when you needed support. And you said it wasn't just you, others felt that way too. You said ESPN can be a difficult environment for anybody as it simultaneously breeds competitiveness and ruthlessness. Unfortunately, what happened to Amina had also happened to far too many Black people who worked at ESPN, especially Black women, many of whom felt undervalued, ignored, disrespected, and belittled. Talk to me about what that means for ESPN. I mean, for you built an extraordinary platform, an extraordinary following there. We loved you on ESPN, and it seemed like a healthy relationship until it didn't. And then now we're finding out just how unsupportive it was. Why is that the case?
Well, I think ESPN, like a lot of corporations, they certainly are not, they're not the league leader in this, if you will, but they do struggle with, or did struggle with. I mean, I can't speak to what the conditions are now, but I have a feeling it's probably about the same, is they struggle with what to do sometimes when you have strong Black voices. And because that comes with a lot. You have to have the stomach for certain fights if you're going to have that. And, everybody isn't created the same necessarily in that regard. Like, there are some people that are just like, hey, we're going to support them no matter what. It doesn't matter. But I think by and large, especially at that time in the country, because I think that part of the context is, or that time it was in the country, that part of the story is very important. Like in 2000, from probably, I want to say like 2014, 15, until at least 18 or 19, maybe even into 20. Yeah. ESPN was in a very polarizing place. The network was being accused by a lot of bad faith right-wing actors of being too political and too liberal. This, to me, coincided when they saw the faces of the network change. So suddenly Stephen A. Smith is becoming the face of the network. You have me, you have Michael Smith, Bomani Jones, Dan Lebertar, Sarah Spain, Kate Fagan. Like, the face and the texture of ESPN started to change because you have people who have different and more inclusive experiences. And sensing that shift, seeing how we talked about sports differently, we talked about it with a different level of fullness and lived experiences, it pissed a lot of people off. And some would say the starting point of that is when Caitlyn Jenner received the Arthur Ashe Award, which is ironic considering what her principles are, right?
Right.
And so that whole too political thing really started to be a common dominant narrative. And because of that, and even though ESPN is by far and away the leading sports media network in the country, it's still a very sensitive company. And they started to react to the reaction instead of what was actually true. The truth of the matter is there wasn't a lot of talk about politics on the network, but no, there wasn't. People, I mean, the way that the Breitbarts and other people were writing about ESPN, you would have sworn that when you turned in to SportsCenter, they were breaking down immigration reform. And it was never that way. But as you know, Mark, that whenever they see a Black face, or they see a woman or a Black woman or a Black man or somebody who's Latino, your presence to them is political. You just being there is political.
Right.
And ESPN started, to me, to react to that in a negative way, in the sense of, instead of just saying those people are going to be happy regardless or unhappy regardless, they started to bend to the pressure of feeling like that they had to appeal to, for lack of a better way to put it, the emerging Trump supporter. They felt like they needed to appeal to that person.
Welcome back to The Griot. We have been talking to journalist and author of Uphill, a memoir, Jemele Hill. Everybody, make sure you check out that book too. It's everywhere books are sold. It's everywhere books are sold. Of course, I tell you how to buy it from a Black bookstore, but anywhere. But make sure you get this book. We want to make sure that this book hits the New York Times list as it deserves to. Jemele, as a journalist, we have to keep track of so many people, and you find ways to remember all the little details by classifying and filing them in your head. So we want to pick your brain just a little bit. I'm going to just call out a name, and I want you to spit out the first thing that comes to mind. Okay, so what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the name Donald Trump?
Racist. I mean, that was the first thing.
Okay, that was easy. Will Smith.
Oof. Wow, you said Will Smith. I'm gonna say compassionate. Yeah.
University of Michigan.
Hateful.
There's definitely some hate, but I'm not sure it's coming from them right now.
No, you're right. Like, they got us, they beat us. All kudos to them, and certainly the scuffle that ensued afterwards was a poor reflection of the university. So that we need to take full accountability for, which Coach Mel Tucker has. But I can't stand them.
I had to do it. All right, a couple more. Colin Kaepernick.
Integrity.
Tiffany hat. Tiffany Haddish.
Confused.
Jessica. Stacey Abrams.
Savior.
Beyonce.
Oh, as if there were a word.
Right. You know what? If you just give a word to Beyonce, the Beehive gonna come for you.
No, I'm just saying as if there could be one encompassing word.
No, I know. I'm saying you're right. Because if you say one word, they could be like, she said one word. Beyonce can't reduced to one word.
Greatness would be the word.
Greatness. Okay, that might save you. All right. Voting rights.
Oh, imperative.
Detroit Lions.
Terrible.
and in that vein, Kanye.
Lost.
You know, let's end on something nice. Black mamas.
Ooh, resilient.
There we go. There we go. Everybody stay right here. We got much more after the break with Jemele Hill. We're going to talk Donald Trump. We're going to talk Kanye a little bit. We're going to talk Twitter. We're going to talk free speech. Stay right here with The Griot. Welcome back to The Griot with Marc Lamont Hill. We have been talking to author and journalist Jemele Hill, who knows all too well the consequences of free speech. Jemele ended her relationship with ESPN in 2018, not long after a controversy brewed when she tweeted that Donald Trump was a white supremacist. Well, she's changed jobs, but she's not letting up on expressing her opinions online. Recently, she tweeted about Ye, aka Kanye West. She said, so many folks are trying to excuse Kanye wearing a White Lives Matter t-shirt as just a troll move or marketing. Maybe it is, but it's a dangerously dumb message to send for someone with his massive platform. I've been off, dude, but y'all go ahead labeling his foolishness as genius. So this is an interesting kind of moment, right? Because years ago, you tweeted in response to Charlottesville and everything else, Donald Trump is, you know, at least trafficking in white supremacy. To me, it was a jab and an obvious thing. Yet the people acted like you started World War III. And now Kanye West, 4 years later, is saying white lives matter and spouting anti-Semitism. And it seems to me that the world kind of is on top of that. How do you kind of make sense of those two moments? Is it the world is finally on top of this stuff and gets it? Is it that it's easier to do when, I mean, what's the reason?
You know, there's some sensibilities that have changed, but I'm not convinced that everybody is really on top of this Kanye West situation. I do still think that he finds an extraordinary layer of support in our community, because the one thing that has become clear for me in all of this is that I think a lot of us, if we're being real, we feel very resentful about the fact that what is getting Kanye kind of up out the paint is because of what he said about Jewish people and not what he said about George Floyd and not what he said about White Lives Matter and slavery is a choice and playing footsie with Donald Trump and all those other things. Right. And I understand those feelings of resentment. However, we partly have ourselves to blame for that, because every time he did those things, we did not set a standard in our community. Jewish people have done that. The LGBTQ community has done that. Like, whenever somebody says something out of pocket, even from their own community, you don't see anybody publicly rallying around them, offering excuses or cover. We did that, all right? For Kanye from the beginning. We tried to say, like, oh, he's confused, his genius. You had artists that still work with him. You had, like, there was never a bottom for him in our community. So how could we be surprised that the response has not been in kind to when he's disrespected us, when we allowed him to and took him back and dropped excuses for it. And now we're mad because another community didn't do the same. They drew their line in the sand and we want to be mad at them for drawing it. No, we need to be mad at ourselves because we didn't draw that same line. And some of us did, not everybody, but as a community, we were just like...
People still bought Donda. People still went down to Sunday service. Like you said, artists...
You cannot be surprised, okay? We didn't cancel them, all right?
Right.
So it is what it is. So what I will say, now, absent of that, I do think there's some truth to the sense that being anti-Black is not the same reaction unless it has a racial slur or something so over the top that there's no defense or that there's just no coming back from. I do think that that is definitely the case because anti-Blackness has just been trafficked so long and is so ingrained in this country, for sure. But one of the reasons, or one of the things that I think that we can do is that we have to set a standard in our own community, even if it means holding somebody whose talent you really respect, holding them accountable.
Do you ever feel frustrated, angry, maybe even bitter when you make a statement, you catch hell for it, like the Twitter situation with Donald Trump, or maybe Kanye or whatever, and then the world catches up 3 or 4 years later, but you don't like unpay the price, right? You don't get, undragged on Twitter, right? The stuff's already happened. You ever feel like that?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's bitterness. Like with the Donald Trump situation, as much as I knew it was true, there are some things you say that you almost don't want to be right about. That I'd rather be proven wrong than right. Like, I'm not here for I told you so, because that usually means that we're in a worse off place as a society. Donald Trump, being a white supremacist, put us in a worse off place politically, socially, all these other places. If there is something I wish I would have been wrong about, it's that. And even with other things that I've said, it's like, yeah, I see what I see, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope this turns out way differently. I wish I was wrong about Kanye West after he started exhibiting some of this behavior years ago. I wish I was totally wrong, but it kind of is what it is. What I will say to people, though, is that it does teach us a lesson about how we need to sometimes get out of our feelings and get out of our ego and really understand the full complexities of a relationship. I mean, we're having a similar conversation with Kyrie Irving about where he stands and what we're witnessing from him.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a Kyrie question since you said that. Mm-hmm. Is he another Kanye? Is it that he doesn't read and just tweets and he's just trying to figure the world out and he's tweeting his way through it? Is there a strategy or plan here that I'm missing? Like, is he like an evil genius? I mean, sometimes with Kyrie, I just don't get what his game plan is.
I don't know that he has one. I think he's learning about some things in real time, but I do see a very interesting pattern, because we saw Deshaun Jackson, something very similar. He had to get checked about in terms of being anti-Semitic, some of the things that he was platforming on his social media account. Kyrie, Nick Cannon. I know that there's more going on there. It's something that I've been thinking about for a column for The Atlantic about what is going on there. Even Ice Cube, like there's a through line that's happening there in terms of how specifically we as a community are talking about their community and why. And I do think it gets back to some of that resentment. Like, we got to be real. We are carrying resentment as a community, not everybody, but just being general here, toward Jewish people, toward Asian people, because when there was the anti-Asian bill, I saw a lot of us who were really upset, but we're being upset at the wrong people, right? It's like, we need to be upset at white supremacy. The whole point and focus of white supremacy is to pit us against each other. So every time we engage in the oppression Olympics with other groups, we lose. Everybody actually loses, all right? And so we need to stop being sucked into that. Like, we can still advocate for ourselves. And I think anybody who is the real leadership in this community will completely give credit to us, because Hassan Minhaj said something very funny but true. He said, listen, Black people were the ones who were at the forefront of this. We just got CC'd on the email. And he understands it. And I think when you talk to the real people in those communities, they will tell you the same thing. And what white supremacy does is that it forces us to have this, there can only be one mentality. And that's how we all lose. Because if we all, it's not like if this thing goes down in a bad way, they ain't coming for all of us. They're not going to pick and choose and say, you know what, Asian people, we're going to leave y'all alone. No. We're going to all be out there in the field, so to speak. All right? So
that's real.
That's why we have to make
Before
sure
we take
that
this
we don't
break,
allow ourselves
No. I was going to ask you before we take the break. So when we think about the kind of focus we need and not be distracted by being mad at the wrong people, I'm trying to think who the right people are. Is it okay to be mad at Candace Owens?
Oh, it's always okay. Clarence Thomas, Candace Owens, always okay to be mad at them.
Jemele Hill is in the building, and coming up, we're going to ask her about the GOAT conversation. Welcome back to The Griot. We have been talking to Jemele Hill. She's the author of the book Uphill, a memoir. Make sure you check it out right now, anywhere books are sold. But we can't let her come on the show, though, and not get her hot takes on the GOATs of sports. So we're going to do a little bit of this or that. Jemele Hill, LeBron James or Steph Curry?
Ooh, that, you know what? As soon as you said LeBron, I just assumed Michael Jordan was
Yeah, that's too easy.
You're right. That is too easy. Oh, okay. So, man, this is going to be tough. But I'm going to go with Steph, and this is why.
Whoo, that's a hot take. Go ahead. I got to hear this.
This is why, though. I will hope people understand this answer. As a player, I think LeBron James is a better player. In terms of impacting generations of people, it's Steph Curry. Because the way the game is played now, Steph Curry has a lot to do with it. And some could look, a coach will tell you in all the bad ways. Because, yes, because you got people pulling up from 45 feet. Like, everybody think they can shoot a three, right?
Right. Right. We used to cut Sean Respert out for that back in the day.
My former Spartan. Yeah, I know.
Exactly. It's like everybody does it. I'm going to run through these because I want your top of the brain, not thinking about it too hard answer. Let me see here. Odell Beckham or Marshawn Lynch?
I'm going to go Marshawn Lynch. Listen.
You're choosing violence today.
He's is an experience.
Yeah, I was about to say, Serena Williams, I don't even know why I'm asking this one. Serena Williams or Rafael Nadal?
No, it's Serena.
Yeah, Sue Bird or Dawn Staley? Oh, that's tough.
All right, I'm gonna say Dawn Staley.
I'm from North Philly, so I have to say that, and I do think that's the right answer. But that's a tougher one than it's one of the things that I
call me just sucking up to the host.
Right, there you go. That's your out. Tom Brady or Peyton Manning?
Tom Brady.
Naomi Osaka or Coco Gauff?
Naomi Osaka.
This is the one answer that's super high stakes, so please answer this correctly. Eagles or Cowboys?
Oh, Eagles. Yeah. Like, that's not really that high stakes.
On this show it is.
Well, yeah, but the reason why I say that is like the Cowboys, the way they act sometimes, they're fans. They're
terrible. Cowboys fans are terrible human beings. Allison Felix or Sha'Carri Richardson?
Oh, Allison Felix.
Phillies or Astros?
Astros.
Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant?
Michael Jordan.
Yeah, nice and easy. All right, hang with me. I got to take a break. Welcome back to The Griot. We have been talking tonight with Jemele Hill about her new memoir. It's called Uphill. Make sure you check it out. Now, in the book, you talk about your relationship with your mother. How does that dynamic shape the family that you're building with your husband?
Well, I mean, I do think by probably hearing about some of my mother's struggles that it allowed my husband, and this is to say he didn't from the beginning, but I think it just allowed him to understand her better. Because when we first started dating, my mother, as she has been in other relationships, is extremely overprotective to the point of where we have to have a discussion about boundaries
Right.
with my mother, right? And sometimes, and that would cause friction in our relationship, not me and my husband's, but me and my mother's, when she seemed to be oblivious to those boundaries. And when I pointed them out, her default was, well, I'm your mother. And I'm like, that's not going to cut it. Not at a certain age, right? So I think that it definitely allowed him to understand her more and why some of the conversations that they had earlier on went the way that they did. I'll just say that.
I like it. By the way, your husband is one of my favorite people on social media. I like him as a person in real life, but I also like following him on social media because he always has inspirational quotes. He's always got funny stuff. And he often gives me a window into y'all debates. And I usually take his side on the music debate. So I just want you to know that I like you, but that's my guy.
Okay, yes. I got
you. on the music. How important is it for you to have a relationship that doesn't just include doing life together, but also being able to travel together, to have fun together? I mean, it seems like you all kind of do all the things together.
We do, and I think it's funny because I don't know if I could have diagrammed a relationship like this for myself this perfectly. Sometimes you don't know what you need until you're actually in it, and you're like, wow, I didn't even know I was starved in that way until the water showed up, right? And so that's how he feels. Like for me, is that travel was always a really big part of my life, just by nature of the job. I've always had a very adventurous spirit, and when we started getting serious, and he loved to travel too. It was just one of those added benefits that we could explore the world together and have all these experiences. And yeah, I mean, it's just been really dope. I mean, the pandemic itself, well, obviously awful in many regards because of the lives that it cost and how it permanently changed a lot of our lives. But one of the benefits to it for us is like we got married at the bottom of 2019. The pandemic was just 3 or 4 months later. And we both, because of work.
That could test a relationship.
It can, and it definitely can. And we're newlyweds. And the thing is, you know, we both have, we both have aggressive travel schedules with work. But that we had to, of course, slow down, spend a lot of even more time together. And I thought it was really such a positive for our relationship. Like we learned so much more at such a more rapid pace that now when we're gone, we not only miss each other, but it just really feels weird. And I also say too that I think it was just necessary for me. Like it was time for me to slow down. And now all of a sudden when I'm taking trips for work, I'm thinking about the quickest way to get in and the quickest way to get out. And I don't know that I had that mentality before.
That is a big deal and part of the journey, right? And another part of the journey, I think, is finding non-romantic relationships and friends that nurture you and give you the things that you need in life. And I noticed when I look on Instagram, you got a crew of Black women, journalists and professionals, and a lot of them are friends of mine too. And I see y'all taking trips. I see y'all kicking it. No dudes allowed, you know. But it looks like y'all having a great time. And what is that about?
Well, it was a friendship, a wide friendships that formed during the pandemic. Like we started this group chat, you know, the basis of all good friend groups. And from the group chat, we because it was such a source of understanding, we felt like we could really be ourselves in this group chat. I mean, as you mentioned, like some of these women are like so incredible, from Natasha Brown, who's on the ground in Georgia, Black Voters Matter, Alicia Garza, the former co-founder of Black Lives Matter, Angela Rye, you know, Tiffany Cross, Joyanne Reed, like Sunny Hostin, you know, it's just like Brittany Packnett Cunningham. We have like so much fun together. And I think because we do lead these lives outside of our friendship that are very high strung, a lot of stress, a lot of different things, to be able to find a collective body of women who can share in some of these same experiences, who've been through media, where we can be resources to each other. No, it doesn't matter. I could tell them I'm going to the moon. And if I reach out in this group chat and say, any of y'all know a hair and makeup artist, I'll have 10 suggestions. Like it's just, they are on it, you know? So it's really been a wonderful experience. And, you know, we decided to take it from just texting to like, let's do, we call ourselves the Machetes. Let's do a Machetes vacation. And that is because of Sunny Hostin. And that's a whole story that I don't know if I'm allowed to tell publicly.
All right, I don't want you giving up no tapes to get in trouble. But it's such a dope group, and it's such a dope idea. Let me ask you, if you could talk to Jemele Hill, 15-year-old Jemele Hill, what would you say to her?
I mean, I think the number one thing I would say, I wouldn't want to give away anything that happens. Number one thing I would say is that it does actually get better. Because I think at that point, you know, much like a lot of young people in life, you're wondering about the future. And for me, because of some of the difficult circumstances and the turbulence I had dealt with, you know, growing up and was still dealing with in that moment, I really was wondering, like, is this going to get better? It's like, am I going to feel not just like I have a real future? Am I going to feel a sense of agency? Because I felt so powerless during that time, even though at an early age, you know, from 10th grade on, I decided I wanted to be a journalist, a sports journalist at that. And even though I was starting to be curious about that and trying to figure out what that looked like for me, I still just felt so aimless and not in control. And so I would tell that 15-year-old that it does get better. I wouldn't want to give away any of the experiences. I'm not somebody who traffics in regret. I believe every experience that I've had, even in the most negative times, has led to a greater understanding of myself. And it's also led to me being further along, be it emotionally, be it even physically in some regards. Like as bad of the moments that I had in my childhood, I wouldn't want it any differently at all.
Wow.
I mean, which is a tough thing to say, because at the same time, I know what my mother went through to get me to this point. I wouldn't wish that on her at all.
And selfishly, your journey, all of it, the good, the bad, gave us you, but it also gave us this amazing book, Uphill, a memoir, which for me is powerful, it's insightful, it's transformative. I want everybody to read it because you really risk the self. You really put yourself on the page with a level of vulnerability and clarity that most people don't do. So I just want to tell you, thank you for this book, and thank you for hanging out with us tonight.
I appreciate you, Mark. I think the world of you, and you're just really great at what you do. So I really enjoyed this interview. So thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Make sure you check out the book. It's called Uphill, a Memoir. You can buy it anywhere books are sold, but of course, we encourage you to support Black-owned bookstores. Everybody, stay with us. All right, everybody, before I let y'all go, I want to thank my guest, Jemele Hill, one more time for joining us for the entire show. The conversation with Jemele Hill is really a reminder of a few things. One, listen to Black women. Is that oftentimes Black women are warning us ahead of time. Black women are warning us of white supremacy. Black women are warning us of environmental abuse. Black women are warning us of corrupt child welfare systems. And oftentimes we don't listen to it until there's an issue that affects us, and then we care. But Black women are often the miners or the canaries in the mine that tell us that information. Did you know that 80% of Black women suffer from fibroids? 80%. Can you imagine an illness that Black men had that Black women didn't know about? Impossible. But somehow Black women are suffering silently from fibroids because we don't listen to their pain. We don't listen to their health concerns. We don't listen to the challenges and realities that they have every single day. But Black women chart those things for us if we just pay attention. Listening to Black women doesn't just mean respecting their truth or listening to their histories. It also means hiring them. When you look at somebody like Jemele Hill, for example, what we see is someone who's excellent at their job, someone who can perform at the highest levels, but oftentimes we don't listen to Black women. We don't hire Black women because we're looking for men to do the same job. We believe that somehow a man has to do it in order for it to be successful, in order for it to be right. But if we put women in our boardrooms, if we put women in our newsrooms, if we put women in front and behind the camera, if we let women lead our projects, not just be on the team, but lead the projects, we'll get more vision. We'll get more insight. We'll get more analysis. We'll get deeper experiences. We'll be able to win. If you want to win, bring Black women with you. If you want to thrive, allow Black women to lead. Jemele Hill teaches us that, but every single Black woman on my team, on my staff, at the Griot, and around the world tells us that too.